In this part of our tutorial, we're going to declare our variables and they will handle some text input. So we're going to start by creating our variables. We'll declare them first at the very top, and then we'll initialize them to store the input from our text boxes. So again, first we'll declare the variables, and then they'll handle the input from the 4 variables that the user will input. So remember, in our main.storyboard we had the 4 text inputs. We need to create a handler for each of those 4 so that when text is inputted, we can store it in a variable to manipulate later on. Now we need to add some handlers to actually handle the input texts. So going back to main storyboard, again we have 4 input texts, so we need 4 handlers, and we have a 5th output text, so we're going to need another handler for that. So let's go to our class declaration, and we're going to create some global variables. So our first is going to be the principal investment. So if we go back to main storyboard, we have the principal investment, we have the interest, number of times compounded per year, number of years invested, and the final value. So these are going to be our 5 variables. So let's make these all doubles, because we're going to have decimal places for most of them, and some of the math involved is going to need doubles. So this one we'll call principal investment, and these are just going to be declarations up here because we're just declaring them as global variables, and we'll implement them down here. Okay, so and then we create another double, and this one's going to be interest rate, and we'll do another one. We'll call this one compounds per year. So this is going to be the number of times it's compounded per year. And we'll create another double, and that's going to be the time invested. So it's going to be, in fact, let's say years invested. And we'll create the final one. This one's going to be the double, and this is going to be final investment. Okay, so just to recap, principal investment is the amount of money that we're going to invest at the start. The interest rate is going to be how much interest we'll gain per year. Compounds per year is the number of times it's compounded. Typically this is just 1 if it's compounded once per year. We have the years invested, so this is the total number of years that we have our money invested. And the final investment will be the final value. This will be the value of our investment after this many years, compounded this many times at this interest on this amount of money. Okay, so now we've declared our variables. Let's initialize them. So under the click button, this is where I'm going to add the handlers. So I'm just going to put this down a couple of lines, and I'll put them here. So our principal investment is basically going to be the text input from our, if we go back to the main storyboard, it's going to be the text input from this text field. And if we go to look under properties, we find this name is going to be txt principal investment. So what we want to do is we want to, going back down to here under the click button, and this is going to be within the button calculate.touch inside. But what we're going to do is we're going to say txt, in fact we would need to pass this. So we're going to do double.parse, and then in the brackets this is going to be txt, and this is going to be the principal investment. So it's nice that we have this come up, gives us a list of options that we can choose from, and again we're just going to choose principal investment and click enter, close the brackets off. Okay, and we're going to take the text from that. So let me just explain what's going on. If we look in the click button method, we have this button calculate.touch up inside plus equals delegate. What this is going to do is this is specifying the button that we created. This is which we called button calculate. This is our button. And the touch up inside is basically saying when this button is pressed, then it's going to carry out whatever is in these brackets. Okay? So our first line is taking the text input from the text principal investment field, and it's going to store it in this variable here. Okay, so we'll do that for the other three variables, leaving final investment out. That we'll deal with later. So for the first four variables, this is principal investment, interest rate, compounds per year, and years invested, we need to add these text input handlers. Okay, so I'm just going to add the other three, and then I'm going to just review what's going on. So this is going to be interest rate, is going to be double dot pass, and we're going to take in the txt interest rate dot text, and our compounds per year is going to take in the double, it's going to be pass, and this is going to take in txt compounds per year and the text field from that. And our final one is years invested, and we're going to convert to double, it's going to be pass, and we'll take in the txt years invested text. Okay, so I know I went through that pretty fast, but here I'm just going to explain what's going on. So again, we're storing, for the first one, we're storing the results in principal investment. This double dot pass is just taking this input and it's changing it to a double. Because the inputs and outputs are supposed to be strings, but we can't work any kind of math with strings. We have to first convert it to a double. So that's what the double dot pass is doing. All it's doing is converting it to a double and making sure that it's stored in principal investment. Now this txt principal investment dot text is basically taking the text input from this field. So if we go back to main storyboard, it's when our app runs, we're going to have to enter four fields. We're going to have to enter numbers into these four fields. It's going to take the text from this field, so text from the principal investment, and it's going to convert it to a double, and it's going to store it in this variable. Okay, that's all it's doing. No, it looks complicated, but it's just performing this simple task. And that's the same with the other three. The reason we have to call .text is because we're taking the text field from this. If you look at the other possible options, there are many. So we can take text, we can take the text alignment, text color. There's lots of different things we can do, but we just want the text itself, which is why we say .text. And this just specifies which of the four fields we're going to be taking the text from. Okay, so it wouldn't make much sense if we were taking the interest rate from the text principal and the principal investment text field. That wouldn't make any sense at all, which is why we have to again specify which field we're taking it from. So now we have our inputs set up. These four variables will just take the inputs when this button is pressed, and we're going to do something with them in a little bit. For now, I just wanted to initialize our variables, so we declared them up here. We're initializing them here, so we're just handling the input and storing it in these variables. So in the next part, we'll actually finish implementing the methods. This will be the calculation and the print functions. In this part of our tutorial, we declared our variables to handle the text input. So we created four variables to store the four number inputs that the user will input by taking the text field and passing it to a double and then storing it in this variable for us to manipulate and use later on. So by now you should be able to handle text input and store it in a variable, again so that you can use it later on, because it's important to be able to take user input and, in our case, perform some calculation with it.